There once was a young boy who lived in a small village on the outskirts of a dark forest. The trees stared out like silent watchers with twisting branches that reached toward the sky. He had always been scared of the forest, but there was one thing he feared more, and that was being alone. The boy had grown up with many siblings in the village, more than he could count. And for as long as he could remember, he had always had someone nearby. The day before, the boy had gotten very tired after playing the whole afternoon and had fallen asleep in a haystack near the village granary. The scent of dry straw clung to his clothes, and the night air hummed with the distant calls of unseen creatures. Still, he slept softly in the straw that night. And when he awoke, he started walking back to his family's small house with light steps. As he got closer, he noticed that the worn-down wooden house seemed empty. The shutters swayed slightly in the wind, and a deep, unsettling silence pressed against the walls. He could not see any of his brothers or sisters running around, creating their usual mess to disturb their father. His mother was nowhere to be seen either. The boy walked up to the old handle of the door and tried pulling it down, but it wouldn't open. The iron latch was colder than usual under his fingers. The warmth from the fireplace inside hadn't touched it today. "That's strange," he thought to himself. "They've never locked the door before." He looked through the broken front window for signs of anyone moving inside, but not even the mice were stirring. It seemed as though his whole family had left in a great hurry. He searched the overgrown flower garden and shouted their names. He hoped they were all just playing a prank on him, but nobody answered his cries. The boy became worried and went over to the local shopkeeper to ask if he knew where his family had gone. Excuse me," stuttered the boy to the shopkeeper. "Do you know where my family has gone?" "Oh my," answered the shopkeeper. He was stacking a bundle of dried flowers on the counter when all of a sudden he paused mid-motion. An uneasy sensation came upon him. "Have they really left you behind? I spoke to your parents last night when they were packing to leave. They said they couldn't stay here anymore." "What do you mean?" asked the boy worriedly. A cold weight settled in his stomach, and he grabbed the corner of his tunic in an attempt to hold on to something sturdy. "Why would they leave?" the boy questioned. "Well," replied the shopkeeper, "they said that they have so many children and couldn't keep track of them all anymore. Feared some of you might wander off and get lost in the forest." The boy didn't answer. He just stood still, staring at the shopkeeper as tears welled in his eyes. His vision became clouded from the gathering emotions, turning the dimly lit shop into a blurry mixture of wooden beams and dried herbs that hung from the beams. The shopkeeper leaned over to comfort the boy by stroking his brown hair, as the boy sniffled his nose and wiped away the salty droplet that was now rolling down his cheek. His chest ached, but he tried to suppress the lump that was rising in his throat. "Which way did they go?" he asked, in a sharp voice that tried to conceal his fear. The shopkeeper lifted his hand and pointed towards a narrow, winding path that led into the forest and vanished beneath the thick canopy of trees, where the sun's light barely reached the ground. Before he could finish giving the boy his directions, the child had already set off toward the road. His small feet kicked up the dust that covered the village square as he strode forward with determination. The shopkeeper continued explaining how the boy should navigate the bends to reach the other end, warning him what would happen if he strayed from the correct path. But the boy could only think about seeing his mother again, so he paid no attention to the instructions. With firm steps, the boy wandered towards the edge of the forest and didn't look back once as he set out on his journey to find his family. The road meandered back and forth between the trees of the forest, and it never seemed to end. The shadows from the trees stretched long and deep, twisting across the path like grasping fingers. Whichever way the boy looked, he could see nothing but trees, trees, trees. The dense canopy above swallowed the sky, allowing only slivers of light to filter through. The road kept turning around the bends as it weaved its way out of his sight. Doubt arose in his mind. Should I turn back or keep going? He thought. His small hands trembled at his side. Even if I turn back, I've nowhere to go, he lamented. Only one thing was certain. The journey to find his family lay ahead. So he continued onward. Some time had passed, and the sun was starting to reach the horizon. Its last golden rays slipped through the trees, painting the sky in streaks of red and orange, but the forest floor remained cold and dim, untouched by the warmth of the setting light. After a while, the boy came upon a crossing in the road. He had been walking for so long that he didn't anticipate the winding path would ever change. But suddenly it did. It split into two narrow trails, each vanishing into the depths of the wood. He had no idea which trail to follow, and he tried his best to remember what the shopkeeper had said about which path to take, but he couldn't remember any of it. The boy sat down in the middle of the crossroads and began to cry. He dug his fingers into the dirt beneath him, feeling the cold embrace of the forest. He had never felt so alone, and the only thing around him were trees so tall he couldn't even start to guess where they'd end. He was lost, and while he sat there, the last rays of sunshine slowly lost their strength, and the world around him turned into shadow. When he looked up again, the forest was dark. The air became thick with the scent of damp earth and wet leaves. His sadness turned to fear as he realized he'd likely be spending the night in a place he'd never been before. A cold wind sighed through the trees. He was lost and alone. His teary eyes started to wander between the thick trunks of the trees, looking for anything that could provide some comfort. He looked left and right, then back and forth, but all he could see was the forest turning even darker. The trees were now mere silhouettes against the dying light. That was until he noticed something, a flicker, a brief glimmer that cut through the darkness like a needle piercing fabric. The light caught his attention. It was there for a moment and then disappeared. Had he just imagined it? He stared in the direction of where he had seen it. "Hello?" he shouted out in a trembling voice. His words barely carried and soon disappeared into the waiting silence. There was no reply, but the light turned on again, and this time it didn't disappear. What could it be? He wondered nervously. His heartbeat quickened, a quiet drumming inside his chest. With slow steps, he chose the path that led towards the faint light, and he didn't take his eyes off it for a single moment. The light was further away than it seemed, and he followed it for so long, not realizing that he had wandered off the road and into the forest. Here the trees grew even denser. When he looked back, he couldn't see anything at all. Not the crossing, not the road. Nothing. It was all shrouded by darkness, leaving only tangled roots and thick undergrowth. As he turned back towards the light, it too was gone. A deep chill crawled up his spine. Above the treetops, a beautiful full moon started to appear, rising like a silver coin against the black sky. The tangled branches parted just enough to let its light slip through to cast long shadows upon the forest floor. Its glow illuminated the ground around the boy's feet. Its cool rays gave him more warmth than anything else he'd felt that entire day. A slight relief awakened in him, as if the moon itself was watching over him. As he looked up for a moment, he felt that everything could be all right. The road was still out of sight, but if he could stay brave through the night, he could search for it again tomorrow. When he had been sad before, there was always someone right next to him, a hand to hold, a quiet voice to whisper to. But now he was alone. He missed his mother more than anything, even though she rarely had time to care for him, especially what with all his other siblings. She was always busy, but he still longed for how she'd brush the hair from his face, even if by accident. From deep inside the forest, he suddenly heard a terrible noise. It tore through the stillness like a blade across stone. He looked in the direction the noise came from, but couldn't see any movement. The trees stood silent. With slow footsteps, he made his way toward it, not knowing what he had just heard. Each step heavier than the last. His heart pounded against his ribcage, urging him to turn back. But something, curiosity, hope or fear, kept him moving forward. Whatever caused it must have been large, and it scared him. As he moved closer and closer to the sound, he became more and more careful, his breath shallow, his hands clenched into small, trembling fists. Then he heard it again, only this time it was much closer and louder than before. It was not just a sound, it was a presence. This time he could hear it more clearly. It was a sharp screech that echoed through the forest as something rustled around in the bushes. The sound was shrill and grating, like metal crying from being torn apart. He didn't dare go any closer, and hoped that whatever it was hadn't noticed him yet. His body tensed up, and he held his breath, afraid that any sound would betray him. Carefully, he took a step in the opposite direction from where he'd heard the noise, his feet barely touching the ground, every movement slow and deliberate. But just when he thought he was safe, a branch snapped in half under the pressure of his foot. The crack echoed throughout the trees. The rustling of leaves instantly stopped. A dreadful silence wrapped around the whole forest, and even the wind seemed to vanish. The boy quickly looked behind him, but he couldn't notice anything coming from that direction. The darkness was thick and unmoving. It was dead silent. In an instant, he started running away as fast as he could. He called out for his mother, but his cries were swallowed by the shadows. He ran and ran till his legs couldn't run any more. At last he stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed to the ground, trying to catch his breath. The air was thick and heavy, but under the moonlit sky, the weight of the forest felt just a little lighter. He was safe, for now, but he became heavy with sleep. His eyelids drooped, and his body swayed where he sat. The fear still clung to him, but exhaustion was stronger. He didn't know how long he had been awake, but felt fortunate that the moon was still shining its calming light down upon him. When his heartbeat calmed down, he struggled to keep his eyelids open. Sleep crept over him like a thick fog, dragging him towards its depths. The branches of the surrounding trees seemed to close in on him in a constricting embrace. His footsteps disappeared from the mossy carpet behind him, swallowed by the earth as if he were never there at all. The sounds of nearby insects slowly faded away. As he lay down, he remembered what it was like living in the house with his siblings. The crowded rooms, the endless bickering mixed with laughter. There had never been enough space, never enough food, and never enough love to go around. His parents had so many children to take care of that each child received very little attention. It was like fighting over crumbs at the dinner table. Did they even notice that I was gone? He thought to himself, as a new tear formed in the corner of his eye. His chest ached, heavy with a loneliness that he hadn't fully understood until now. Maybe they left me behind on purpose. The thought settled over him and he shivered, not from the icy breeze, but the realization that he may have been abandoned. As the first tear rolled off his face and splashed on the ground beneath him, he heard a faint sound cutting through the silence. It was as soft and distant as a dream, but he could tell it was real. He jumped up and listened intensely. It was a voice, but nothing like the dreadful screech from before. This voice was warm and friendly. It was a woman's voice, and it was humming a song he had never heard before. The melody wrapped around him like a blanket, soothing his heart and comforting him. It gave him enough courage to cry out for help. "Hello?" he shouted nervously. His voice trembled as a thread of fear still clung to his words. The woman stopped humming and started walking towards him. "Is someone there?" she asked in a worried tone. Her voice was now clearer and closer, but still soft. "Over here, I'm lost," cried the boy. The woman reached the clearing and saw the state the boy was in. His face streaked with dirt and tears, his hair tangled like the roots of the forest. She hurried to lift away the branches that covered him. He hadn't noticed that his arms were scratched and his shirt torn from the prickly thorns. She knelt beside him and spoke softly. "Oh, my child, my sweet, innocent child, what are you doing out here all alone?" The boy explained how he had wandered into the forest looking for his family, the road they had taken, and how they had forgotten to bring him. He choked a little on the words as he said them. "I was following a light in the forest and lost track of where I was." He clenched his hands in his lap, trying to control his trembling grip. "Well, the forest can be very dangerous at night," the woman answered, quickly gazing around the deep blackness beyond the clearing. "It is no place for little children." She reassured him with a gentle smile. "If you want, I can get you out of here," she said. "Will you come with me?" Her voice was calm, an affirming thread to guide him out of the darkness. The woman stood up and extended her hand toward the boy, inviting him to follow her. He placed his hand in hers, and she led him through the thicket. Her touch was warm, and for a moment the boy forgot the coldness of the forest. As they walked, the boy became tired once more, his eyelids heavy like stone. He struggled to keep focus on where they were going. He kept placing one foot in front of the other as the woman ushered him forward. Eventually he couldn't resist any longer. His mind, exhausted by fear and strain, finally surrendered and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he and the woman were no longer walking among the trees. He didn't know how long he had slept, but it only felt like a moment. They were walking on a road. The ground beneath him was firm and smooth, and it stretched out before them like a streak of light that cut through the night shadows. "Where are we?" asked the boy in a tired yawn. His voice was thick with exhaustion, as if the weight of the world was hanging on his tiny shoulders. "You don't have to worry about the forest anymore," answered the woman. "We'll be home soon." They were not walking on the same road as before, but he didn't mind. The path was clearer, and the soft glow of the moon lit their way, and for the first time in hours, the boy felt like he was walking towards something safe. As he looked toward the end of the road, he could see a large house standing proudly between the towering trees. It rose like a great stone sentinel, with sharp edges that cut into the night sky, and windows that glowed with a warm and inviting light. He had never seen a house that big before. He didn't know houses that big existed. The house where he lived with his family was too small for him and his siblings to fit comfortably. If his siblings beat him to a few available beds, he would have to find other places to sleep. Wherever he could find space to curl up sufficed. The floor, corners, or a haystack outdoors. He entertained himself with the thought that it was probably the only household where the kids wanted to go to bed early. "Who lives there?" the boy asked curiously as he pointed towards the large house ahead of them. His eyes were wide and filled with wonder. The woman looked upon him and replied in a soft tone, "That's my house. There is plenty of room for you too, if you'd like to stay here." Her dulcet tones made the boy feel as if he had been cared for his whole life. He started thinking about his family again and wondered where they could be now. The image of his siblings flashed through his mind, how they'd run, shout, and make a mess together. Surely they'd gone through the forest already and found a new home somewhere far away on the other side. He thought about how none of them had turned back for him while he walked that long road alone, and how much space he would have to play in if he lived in the big house with the woman. It was a tempting thought, being away from the cramped village. He hadn't felt sorrow like before as he walked beside the woman. And now he wasn't alone anymore. The fear that had clung to his chest the whole day began to fade. For the first time, he felt as though someone was not just beside him, but on his side. In the sky above the large house, the full and bright moon looked to be almost touching the tip of the tallest spire. Its light bathed the house in an otherworldly glow, casting long, delicate shadows that stretched out across the ground. Its soft glow lit up the path towards the house, making the surrounding forest seem even darker by contrast. "What do you say?" asked the woman with a compassionate smile. Her eyes sparkled softly in the candlelight. They stood in front of the main door as it opened. The heavy door creaked open slowly, revealing a warm, inviting glow, a stark contrast to the cold and oppressive night they were leaving behind. Warm candles were burning inside the lobby, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, as if the house were welcoming them home. The boy looked up at the woman and smiled back at her. Then he stepped inside the house and answered, "Yes, please, I'd like that very much." His voice was quiet, but there was hope in it, like it was something he had longed for without even knowing it. The woman followed him inside and closed the door behind them. The soft thud completely shut out the forest, and with it, the boy's worries. After he had washed himself, the woman showed the boy to his new bedroom. Inside it, he could see a bed, a large, cozy bed with blankets that looked as soft as the clouds in the sky, promising a night of restful sleep. It was like his very own new bed. "Welcome home," she affectionately stated, her voice tender, as the warmth surrounding them made him feel as if he had always belonged there. She tucked the boy into the sheets and kissed him on his forehead. "You're safe now," she said, "but you must promise to never go back into the forest." Her words were gentle but firm, the resolution only a mother's love could carry. "I promise," he responded honestly. His heart felt lighter as the burden of the forest lifted with each word she spoke. The woman smiled and got up to leave the room, and once in the doorframe, she turned around and whispered, "Good night, my child." Her silhouette in the doorway was a comforting presence, a guardian watching over him, keeping the shadows at bay. "Good night, Mother," replied the boy, as his eyelids closed and sleep finally rushed through his entire being. He was so tired from his trials that he finally surrendered to the sleep he had longed for. Although not as he'd expected, the boy had found what he was looking for, and he slept peacefully through the night. Outside, the darkness that was once filled with terror now felt distant, as if it belonged to another world altogether. The end.